where are we now compared to 12 months ago in terms of kind of enterprise adoption of agentic AI?
From a technical perspective, it seems like it's been 10 years since we last talked. I mean, that's how fast AI is moving.
The most limiting factor for me in AI today is a complete lack of imagination. All we're doing 100%. Is replacing what we're already doing.
We ran a test right before Easter. Well, like 17,000 pages or something we brought in, 40 web pages. It took a couple hours or so to ingest. And we already had the infrastructure deployed because we do isolate content. I mean, we want to make it very safe, but it's very fast. This is all, done through automation. But within a couple hours, we had an enterprise-grade solution scoring at 98.9 or 99%.
If it works as described, we are reaching a phase where it is or will be possible for almost anyone to build an AI agent and take it to production.
This is way bigger than the internet. And it's going to be up to people whether or not they want to chase it.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with CCW. The UK Summit is coming up on the 11th to 13th of May. I'm sure you know CCW. It is the flagship CX event globally, really. I mean, they've got cohorts all over the world, Europe, America. This UK Summit in May is set to be absolutely amazing. The keynote speaker is Rory Sutherland, who I'm personally a huge fan of. He's the vice president at Ogilvy, author, speaker, always talks great sense in terms of marketing, branding, customer experience, those kind of things. Got a very kind of keen eye and a good pulse on where things are heading and best practices and things like that. Speakers at the event, let's have a look. Virgin Atlantic, HSBC, Jaguar Land Rover, Carnival Cruises, Fidelity Insurance. You have, is Fidelity Insurance? I think it's insurance, isn't it? E.ON, Welsh Water, Vodafone, PayPal, Lloyds Banking Group, Transport for London, Ocado, Post Office, Virgin Active, Standard Chartered, Bupa, Asahi Group, Henkel, WWF, that's the World Wildlife Fund, not the World Wrestling Federation, British Airways, Estee Lauder, Sky, TalkTalk, you name it, the who's who of customer experience will be there. I'll be there as well. I'll have my camera and a microphone taking the pulse of the CX community and seeing what's occurring. If you want to attend, which I recommend you do, you can find tickets with the link below. If you're watching on YouTube or a video platform, you'll find the links below in the description or on the lower thirds here. And if you are listening on the podcast, check out the show notes and you'll find the link there. Hopefully, I will see you in May. This episode of the podcast is with Merlin Bise, who is the CTO at Inbenta. Now, some of you diehard VUX fans might recognize the voice of Merlin Bise. He's got a very smooth Texan voice from last June, so probably about a year ago or so, almost. And we spoke about agentic RAG, we spoke about Inbenta, we spoke about a lot of topics that were really interesting. And this is a kind of, I suppose, a look back over what's changed over the last 12 months because things have moved on significantly. We talk about Encore, which is Inbenta's latest product offering. We talk about smart agents, which essentially is the ability for an AI agent to take what is effectively just a description of your business, and that is enough for it to go away, do its own research, compile content that's available on the internet about your business from your website and such things, build an agent, and if you provide it access to your APIs, for example, Salesforce or ServiceNow or something like that, then because the system knows those APIs, it can then start to build out agentic processes off the back of it. I think after this conversation, I feel as though we are, if it works as described, we are reaching a phase where it is or will be possible for almost anyone to build an AI agent and take it to production. The big delta recently has been going from prototype to production, and things like this make it easier to go from one stage to another. It doesn't get away from the fact that you've got to do a lot of testing and refinement and things like that, but it does significantly democratize access to building enterprise AI. Claude Code and Replit and Lovable, those tools are democratizing access to AI and access to building stuff for the general public. This conversation, I suppose, is a little bit around how do we democratize the building of AI solutions for businesses. We also talk a little bit about where the future is going and how really a lot of the conversation in AI today in the enterprise is about replacing existing stuff. contact center automation, IT automation, HR automation, sales automation, marketing automation. It's all replacing existing activity. But what do you do when you've done that? For me, it seems as though there's a lot left on the table in terms of imagining what the best version of your business could be and how you can leverage AI to create the best possible version of yourself. I think it's more than just replacing your contact center with AI agents. So it's a very, very interesting conversation in that respect as well. Without further ado, boys and girls, this is Merlin Bise of Inbenta on VUX World. Well, Merlin, welcome back, my friend. Welcome back.
Awesome. Thank you. Great to be here. Look forward to it. Look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and one more, and it's not often we have people back in quick succession because we only did something probably about 8 months ago, which was really good. Very interesting conversation. You're a very interesting guy to speak to. So I thought it's interesting to, now that we're kind of getting into 2026 and, you know, we've had, well, I think probably I would say maybe it's 12 months of, or maybe it's a bit longer, maybe it's 18 months of kind of agentic AI rhetoric and stuff like that. I think it'd be just nice to sort of get your pulse and see what's happening basically. But one thing to mention before we do get into it is that if you get one more session on the VUX podcast, you do get your own VUX baseball cap. Now I know I've been talking beforehand about baseball caps.
I'm getting another one then.
If you get the hat trick, you get a baseball cap, but it's not going to be grey, blue, or white. It will be bright yellow. That's the only caveat.
I will wear it on my fourth visit. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, cool, nice one. So I think last time we spoke was like maybe it's June. I think last summer or something like that. We're kind of heading into the summer again now. We had a really good conversation about you, about your experience, about Inbenta. We were talking about agentic RAG and a whole bunch of other things. It seems to me, I don't know if you would concur with this, but whenever you kind of go online, you go into LinkedIn, Substack, whatever you go to get kind of like news or content or what have you, still I think the kind of agentic AI agents kind of hype, for want of a better phrase, is very much still alive. Maybe it's quieting down a bit since we last spoke, but still very much alive. Yet, when I speak to businesses, you know, large enterprises, they're still kind of, you know, teetering on the edges of trying to make this stuff work, and they're not necessarily going fully agentic in all cases. So I don't know if there's something particular that's holding back progress. I don't know if this stuff will just take longer than normal, but I just wanted to get your thoughts in terms of like where are we now compared to 12 months ago in terms of kind of enterprise adoption of agentic AI?
Great. I think that's a great question. I mean, number one, from a technical perspective, it seems like it's been 10 years since we last talked. I mean, that's how fast AI is moving. I think the challenge enterprises had fundamentally, you know, agentic AI from a fundamental perspective is it's able to do proactive tasks. I mean, let's just level set that. It can behave in a way that's much more independent. Yes, there probably needs to be some type of human in the loop, but it has the ability to be very proactive versus reactive or generative. And so I think one of the challenges is companies recognize they need to deploy agentic AI to drive success within the organization. The challenge I think companies have is the tools. I don't think a lot of the tools were super easy. So it's kind of like the same situation when they're developing software or refining a product. There's a backlog. And so I think they strategically have these ideas, but if they've chosen to build AI on their own, which there's nothing wrong with, because again, we're all in the same AI race. Some people are going to accelerate it versus others just because they fundamentally understand it better. But I think some of the tools were lacking. I do believe the tools have gotten a lot better. I mean, just at Inbenta, our tool stack from where it was last time we talked is like we've went to the moon and came back with new tools. I mean, it's astronomical what you can do from building an agent to deploying assistants. We like to say, you could start working on your enterprise AI deployment, go get a espresso and go get yourself a cookie and come back and you got something to work with versus the old way AI was done. I mean, it was weeks or months. I think the issue is in the past, you had AI that required a lot of technical expertise, way more fine tuning because the models weren't as refined. So the models maybe a year ago struggled, to conceptually understand all aspects of, what you were trying to do with an agentic AI deployment, where today, they just don't at that level. I mean, they can comprehend things they never could a year ago. And I think the tool stack is basically creating this atmosphere AI for anyone. And what I mean by that is, yes, you need IT to make sure you have proper data governance and security, but you don't need IT to build assistants and agents any longer. Business unit owners, corporate executives, support managers, they should be able to build these assistants, ask them to behave a certain way, and they should be able to deploy agents to do tasks. Let me give you a perfect example. A year ago, if you were inside of an assistant and you were asking the assistant, how do I, do this or that, you would have to get specific, like, oh, I need to reset my password. Then it would drive an automation. Some people call that agentic. I call that really agent washing, where we're basically making up that it is agentic. That's really not agentic. That's maybe an advanced automation or a very good automation, but it's not agentic. The way it works today is there's a smart agent that can listen to these conversations. It should be intelligent enough to know, hey, they're struggling with a login. I'm going to reset their password and tell them you're doing it. Hey, I'm resetting your password. You'll get an email. Let me know if there's anything else. So that's the magic of where agentic's taken us is these agents can interject. They can solve situations in real time. They're lowering down the sentiment big time in conversations where someone can be very hyper, very upset, and having an intelligent agent can just adjust that tone big time. And you're starting to see that, more and more at these enterprises. That's where the difference is. It's just these agents are, they have the ability to do things that, quite frankly, I don't think they could do a year ago. And then the last piece of it is, we've built obviously agents with skills that can do a lot of things that fully talk to assistants and talk to all the different automations and integrations we have. We have over 850 in our, studio. But then what I find, really interesting is we've also built this very, sophisticated agentic framework that constantly monitors things like answers to make sure they're accurate so we can eliminate hallucinations. Could we increase better responses if the content was maybe rephrased or cleaned up? So we call that elevate, but it's doing that. And other companies, I'm sure, are developing tools likewise if they don't already have it. But these tools constantly monitor activity, and it's just creating a much better universe to, one, use AI or deploy it. Again, I could go on and on. There is every aspect of the business can be touched by AI, I think today. Yes, if you're, you need to sew something, you could probably get a machine eventually to do it, but I don't know if that's the best use case, try to get AI to build a new sewing machine. But it could touch every aspect of an interaction. If it's something that you would be verbal or digital, AI can drive that. And I would say 70% of the customer service engagements, including I had to speak to a medical professional earlier this morning, I had an option to use AI. So that's what's pretty magical. I don't think that existed a year ago. But clearly tools are way more advanced. The technology is way more advanced. If you don't know how to build an agent, you probably ought to now get with an AI company that can build an agent because, agents are super smart. They do need guardrails. You've got to, make sure you follow the entire life cycle to know where a human needs to be involved because you want to make it safe for your customers and your internal employees and things. But agents are brilliant. I mean, what we're doing with them today is magical compared to where we were a year ago.
It's interesting because you're not the first to mention that, the direction we're heading is that anyone should be able to build an agent. And it kind of reminds me a bit of a conversation I've had recently. I forget who it was with now, but essentially the conversation was about, I had Fergal Reid on the podcast at the beginning of the year. He's the global AI director, I think, for Intercom. And he was talking about how And I've mentioned this a number of times, people are probably getting bored of me saying this, but I think it's very interesting, which is that he was talking about separating the mechanism from the policy when it comes to the technology. So the mechanism should work how it works all the time, therefore the system should be very opinionated about kind of how it does something. But the policy should be flexible so that businesses can have it do their processes using their data and their APIs and stuff like that, because I think you're kind of in two camps. One is the camp that is, we're a platform and we're opinionated and you just plug in your data and your APIs and we'll have an opinion about how things should be done. The other approach is that we're kind of more like a framework and you build it yourself and you can do whatever you want and there's maximum control. So I don't know where you stand on that sort of spectrum, if there is a spectrum to be had there.
That's a great topic. We kind of sit in the middle. So I got to explain. That's actually pretty cool. So when we ingest content, it could be any content. So it can be a database, files, videos, connect to websites, whatever it is. I mean, we've got any kind of content, dynamic or static, doesn't matter. We can use the content. But once we bring that content in, even though we're using large models to curate and refine that content and embed it, we're also still driving with, we believe, the most precise NLP there is, intents. Now, no one else is taking kind of this approach. Why do we take that approach? Because there's two reasons why. I think we can save organizations over 40% on token cost. I can virtually guarantee zero hallucinations. I'm not going to say zero because I don't need to take a Lloyd's of London policy out on it, but I can certainly pretty much guarantee that. And then I can drive new intents. Let's say I created 60 out of 100 and I need 40 more. I can drive them on a fly during a conversation and make sure that I've answered the question. So I've created this very good safeguard. However, in the background, that smart agent knows as long as I'm operating within the context of this content. So I've got all these sources. And by the way, we create a customer lexicon dictionary that's specific to the DNA of the customer. We got 20 years of doing this. So we know how to make it really safe. That's the advantage we have. But it's kind of in the middle because we do have these guardrails, but the agent's intelligent. We don't have restrictions on the intellectual brilliance of the agent. What we're telling the agent is you have to operate with this context and with this content, and we've chosen to be casual in our responses. If you don't have it, you tell them you don't have it. If you want to have a conversation and try to get the information, you can. But we want to save that for someone to approve that content before it becomes mainstream. So we've built this like self-healing refinement suite of operational skills for this agent. So in real time, no matter if it's during a casual conversation about a customer support issue, you're trying to buy a product, maybe you're trying to open an account. So you don't have a support issue really, you just want to open an account. You need us to guide you through the process. This agent has the skills to do all of the above. And it has the skills, if needed, if it senses frustration, it doesn't have the content, it can drive you to a live human. So I think that's the other aspect that sometimes you miss is human in the loop is still extraordinarily important. What you don't want to do is start a conversation. If someone says the word upset, then it goes straight to a human. The agent, the AI is smart enough to be very precise and to calm people down. I mean, as long as the words are correct and it sounds very personal, people will react to that. I just believe they will. And we've seen, and we've done a ton of testing on this. I mean, we've probably way over tested, but in our sentiment scores and kind of, like getting crazy and acting, we've went from just off the chart nuts down to where we are slightly upset. And it is remarkable, as long as you have constraints on the content available, how good these agents are. And by the way, OpenAI is wonderful, but Gemini's just as capable. Claude, Claude's is incredible, but Claude's strongest points probably in refactoring content or, task, specific automation tasks, coding. I mean, they all have these unique use cases. We use all of them. There's over 30 models that we play with and work with. Obviously, we track industry and use case very closely. And by the way, most of our customers will have 12 to 15 different use cases. So they'll have multiple assistants. And so we do some cool stuff like, so you deploy an assistant in the US, but we also obviously have, platform operations in Europe, France, Japan. We're expanding into India, in Latin America. So all of a sudden I say, hey, I want to support my customers in Europe. It's one click. And all of a sudden that assistant starts replicating. It creates all the data governance issues that need to be created for that region. It's pretty wild. I mean, we expect, if you can imagine, it's like a 4-step wizard and you've built an enterprise grade assistant. Then it's a couple other clicks to create whatever scenarios you want to give your agent the ability to perform, and you're done. Now, if you want to log back in and, check the accuracy and check the performance, you have extraordinarily advanced analytics, but AI has to be that easy. It just does. We want to eliminate. So my idea was, let's eliminate these massively expensive implementation and onboarding fees. So our competition, some of them are charging $250,000, $500,000 to build out, these AI solutions. We want to eliminate a lot of that overhead, because the problem is there's no secret why people are building versus buying. I mean, if you go into an organization with a solution that requires a few clicks and you can prove it's safe and it's enterprise grade, and it's, we're an AWS stack, but we also have deployments with Microsoft in Europe for OpenAI, of course. But, when you're running this highly scalable platform with, like someone like AWS or Google, whoever it is, and you can prove that and your stuff works really well and it's affordable and it's easy to get into a POC, companies are going to work with you. And I think that's the shift. So a year ago, we were dreaming about shifting and we were building. We were really close when I talked to you. Today, we have it. And, that's the big shift. I mean, I remember when I first came to Inbenta, it might cost $100,000 to $150,000 plus to deploy an enterprise grade AI solution. It's not that expensive. We figured out a way to do it in a much better clip. And then it allows the company to quickly look at a POC. I mean, you can go through a POC with us in a week or two, versus in the past, you might spend 6 to 8 weeks or, 3 months just getting it built to where it reached acceptable levels. Not the case anymore. It literally, we ran a test right before Easter. I think 17,000 pages or something we brought in, 40 web pages. It took a couple hours or so to ingest. And, we already had the infrastructure deployed because we do isolate content. I mean, we want to make it very safe, but it's very fast. This is all, done through automation. But within a couple hours, we had an enterprise grade solution scoring at 98.9 or 99%. And if we'd have kept asking questions, Kane, it would have basically evolved and elevated to virtually perfect. And we also cache content. That's something that you're going to see a lot more.
Yeah.
Where, you got a Starbucks. I mean, that's maybe not a great European example, but there's a lot of Starbucks in Europe. I use them a lot. But, you've got a Starbucks or, Groupon or somebody that's running some big deal. US, Black Friday, everybody has it. Being able to cache that specifically and then have that, globally deployed, you're talking about retrieving content in a nanosecond, forget a second. And it takes, cost down for your end user or your customer. And it's a much better user experience because in a lot of ways, and specifically if it's a coupon that needs a guided like walkthrough, which we do have a product called Learn, it's Learn Plus now. We just released our new version of it. But if you need to attach a walkthrough and that's cached, I mean, that's a super big win for organizations if there's a content that's very repetitive. So anyway, I know that's a little bit long, but it's just crazy how much it's improved. But we're kind of in the middle of that question.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things is, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on how, because from all the companies that we've spoken to on the podcast, the general, I suppose, observation, both on the brand side and on the vendor side, is that it is now far easier than it ever was to get an application from idea to prototype to proof of concept. But going from that prototype to ready for customers at scale seems to be a big jump because, it's fairly simple to, not simple, but it's the task isn't getting something set up. The task is hardening something to make it ready for scale. So what is it that you do differently that enables you to, when you say that you can spin up a production grade agent quickly, what is it that you do differently that enables you to do that versus others that it might take them 4 hours to spin up the prototype, but another 2, 3, 6 weeks worth of testing and iteration to get it to production?
So a couple of things. Yeah. You and I could, exit this podcast. You're a smart guy. We could come up with 2 or 3 creative ideas. We could get into Claude right now. We could prototype them ideas, have it functioning from a local database setup, and have a complete turnkey application within an hour. I mean, Claude can do it. Trust me. Base 44, all these players can do that stuff. The issue, you're exactly right. Enterprise grade security and scale. That's the big one. Can you create a multi-regional versus a multi-tenant enterprise secure solution? So number one, that's what we've done with Encore. It is enterprise grade. It's highly scalable. It operates in multiple regional locations. We can isolate, customers specifically to a region. We can isolate content. We have a lot of banks, a lot of government opportunities, few that are customers. Medical starting to explode as an opportunity for us. In saying that, here's the difference. So we actually create on the fly when we create a customer. Our agentic framework creates this smart agent for the customer. The customer doesn't have to go build an agent. That agent's capable of having sub-agents if it needs to scale. And that agent, basically, our customers create different scenarios that they're going to want that agent to have access to. So what we've done is we've created an agent, back to your original point, that has kind of the ability to do a lot of things. As long as he's inside the framework, we're going to let him play ball. Now, we can put all kind of guardrails around him. So we can, basically allow tuning for that agent to say, you can do this or you can do that. But if it's restricted to content and the context of what's being asked, the agent doesn't behave poorly. Where an agent gets in trouble is they have access to content that's non-relevant, and there's been no guardrails put around the context of what's being discussed. So they may understand the content, but if it's being used a certain way, it's kind of like twisted media. You say one thing, they use it this way versus that way. We don't want an agent having to make that choice. That's where they get in trouble and you have hallucinations and bad decisions. But we create the agent on the fly. It has the ability to scale to more than one agent if necessary. So if there is an automation process, as an example, we have a very large cable an internet provider in Latin America. If they run a special, and most of their traffic comes through WhatsApp, it's fully integrated into our APIs. But let's say they have an outage. Let's just use that. So now versus having a typical 30,000 or 10,000 interactions a day, they're doing 600,000 or 2 million an hour. Well, that's got to scale, because if that agent's got to send people to this location or fire emails off, or he'll scale up more agents. Because, again, we monitor processes and things. We know if an agent needs to scale on the fly. We don't need to touch it. So we actually create these smart agents. The only thing our customer really has to do, and this is what makes it so unique, is they can pick what scenarios, what systems do I want to integrate my assistants to? What, automations do I want to fire off? You can do base automations, or I can say, hey, the agent can choose. I just want to make sure I'm talking to Salesforce. I'm talking to ServiceNow, I'm talking to Workday, one of these big systems. And if, the person asks this question, I want the agent to have permission to go retrieve data, content, provide it based on the context, what's been talked about, but they can have access to this. And some banks will say, I want my smart agent to use an API to retrieve data versus I want to share customer data, which is fine. We do that all the time because they want to be very strict on where their content's at. So these smart agents can do a lot of different things, but we don't have our customers logging in building agents ourselves. It gets built on the fly for them, and it can do a variety of tasks. Now, can we build custom agents for specific tasks? Absolutely. So there is an advanced studio. If a customer wants to come in and they want to build, it's much easier. They want to build and deploy something more advanced, they can do that. But 99% of the time, having a smart agent that has access to the content and contextually understands what's relevant to that business, They can fire off any automation they need to fire off. They can, provide content, can give suggestions to resources. They can do all that. And so it's much easier for the assistant to know, hey, if I have a question, I need to do a deeper search, or I need to do this, I need to create content that I may not have intent for. That assistant has an agent that's watching. It's kind of like a big brother, like a manager. In the old days, if you weren't doing a good job, the guy'd come put his arm around you and start talking to the customer and just completely run you out of the conversation. It's the same thing these agents do. They're intelligent. They know if assistant needs help, they need you to retrieve, fire something off. And that's where agents are at. A year ago, you would have to build something from the ground up. You would be talking about probably about 8 or 10 agents needed to do what I'm talking about, maybe 12. I mean, it depends on how complex a customer is. These smart agents are able to do multiple tasks. They're called skills. You have to give them the capability. You have to give them access to, a good portion of your platform. But that's how Inbenta does it. We've made it super easy. We do have a team that if we've got an advanced customer that wants to build their own, absolutely. But again, most of our customers are not after that. They do want to make sure that we have automations into all their important systems, that we can retrieve content, push content. A lot of customers want all the interaction with their customers in Salesforce because that's kind of like their holding tank. Do I think Salesforce is going to be the leader in the clubhouse in 10 years? No. I think CRMs are in trouble, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, which maybe we can get to. I think what I suppose I'm kind of maybe not understanding is it, am I right in thinking that your description of a smart agent is one that is already pre-configured for a specific use case? Would I be correct in thinking that?
So every assistant. So what we start with is we have a company. So let me walk you through kind of the starting point. Company comes in, they briefly describe their business. This is how simple it is. They describe their business. If they don't want to type, then they can just hit a button. We'll go grab whatever's available publicly and ask them, is this your business? So we already know what industry it's going to go in. We can start creating lexicon information specific to the business. So we've got a dictionary defined that's specific to unique characteristics of the business. We then start ingesting all the public content. They can tell us where to go, or we can randomly look. Most of the time, they're going to pick, I want these 4 websites. I want this, user forum. I want to, connect to Google Drive, SharePoint, whatever it would be. They connect their content and hit go. So it's building. Then it's going to say, how would you like the assistant to respond? I'd like it to be very casual, very professional. Oh, very happy. This is a younger audience, so I want to keep it for an age group. They can define this kind of stuff. Then they hit go. And so the next step would be, hey, we're building this. Is there any scenarios, or would you like to add, do you need to connect other systems that could be part of this? They choose that. In the background, not only is it ingesting the content, refining the content, by the way, it's in a very standard format. I don't have to necessarily get into that, but it's in AI standard formats. So I always tell people, if we do a bad job, fire us. You can have your data back and it already be ready for AI. So the next guy can have a shot. But it's going to tag content too. You have the ability. You don't have to. But if a customer wants to tag content, they can, because that might be important to them down the road if they want to run specific reports that are necessary. But while that's going on, an agent has been created. And that agent's primary role, so you are correct, we're building them on the fly. The primary role of that agent is to execute any additional things that need to be done. Oh, I want to add this additional content. Oh, I need to refine this content to make a question be answered better. Or I need to build an intent on the fly because it wasn't there. Or I need to drive this automation. If the customer's going this route, that requires a password reset. Or I need to get information out of ServiceNow and retrieve for the customer right now because they're asking about this specific part, which I know that data, I'm a smart agent. I know that data's in ServiceNow. I've already looked at it, already know how it's indexed. I'm going to retrieve the latest content for them in real time. There's stuff like that. So this smart agent, and this agent can scale from 1 to thousands if necessary based on utilization. But we're building that smart agent with skills to do everything we want to allow our customers to do inside of our platform. However, we do have some customers that have specific, so they want agents to do specific things outside of the general, CX, EX assistant type environment. That's where we do have an area where we can build, co-innovate with them. And we have a team that does that. So it's very fast. They're not spending weeks and months trying to figure it out. they can build really intelligent agents to do stuff outside of what our normal deployments would be. Our normal deployments are driven by creating an assistant to do a specific task. Every assistant has the ability for agentic AI, that's fully autonomous based on the content and the context of the conversation. So whatever is being requested by a consumer, colleague, employee, that's going to drive what the capabilities of the agent can do.
Yeah.
The agent itself is not going to randomly do stuff. It's specific to that use case. So yes, on what you were saying, every time a company deploys a use case, there's a smart agent that can function in the background that can do a variety of tasks, and by the way, that's not limited to just that assistant. If you're in our product called Assist, which is a human in the loop. So if I'm in the human in the loop, that smart agent is getting data in real time for the human that's speaking. So if I can be in an audio, video, a digital conversation with you, that smart agent streaming content. That agent has the capability on our voice side to do things like transcribing and listening to conversations. We have another kind of unique opportunity where we're going to use, smart agents to, like, if I came into you and you were like a manager at a store and I came in and talked to you about an issue, that smart agent can listen to our conversation, stream content to you in real time on your screen, but then take a quality assurance score, send it to managers, and start building kind of leadership guidance or how you would improve that interaction with an unhappy customer. It's crazy where this is going, but what we found is we can solve, again, 99% of every use case we have by just building a really smart, intelligent agent that can scale, that sits in the background and just does stuff automatically where necessary. So hopefully that explains it a little bit better, but we're building them on the fly. When we deploy a use case, they're getting a smart agent. That's a no-brainer. And our agentic framework builds it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you ingest a bunch of content based on the business, and that then gives you the kind of premise to have the conversation. You can get a lot of value out of that. I suppose, what then, how then do you mentioned ServiceNow. So for example, let's say that you go and ingest a company's website, you ingest a whole bunch of other content from them, SharePoint or whatever. That's just content, isn't it? It's just so then I've got an agent I can ask a question to and it can give me an answer back. How do you bridge the gap then between the task-based agents that actually do stuff like the password reset?
No, that's an assistant. So the assistant's answering the question. It's an intelligent assistant. The agent's in the background doing the task. It'll go run automation it can run automation automatically. Let me back up. So an agent can run automation anytime during the day that you can schedule. You can go into our studio and say, I want ServiceNow and Salesforce to synchronize, has nothing to do with Inbenta. Mm-hmm. You can do that in the studio. That smart agent I've been talking about can do that task. It knows how to do that. It can also look for, hey, if anybody comments about this, I want you to tell me what it is, but I also want you to update it over here. You can build any scenario you want in the agent platform.
Mm. And that'll be based on prompting and giving it access to the relevant APIs.
Well, there's very little prompting would be needed because we have over 850 integrations. We already know the industry. So the prompt's kind of already been refined on setup. We have a staff that monitors. They've got tools as part of Elevate. We have an agentic framework monitoring it. We know within a nanosecond if a prompt needs adjusted. It's very seldom because we've been doing this a long time.
So you have a bunch of predefined, for example, let's take ServiceNow. Predefined prompts based on the ServiceNow API of all of the most common things likely to need to be done using ServiceNow, yeah? Interesting.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing I would add that's pretty radical, this sounds very simplistic, but you have a button under content. So we had a company that they work on plane crash recovery. So if there's a plane crash, they go in and they got these brilliant engineers. Believe it or not, they had very little content. They've been doing it for like 25 years. They hadn't documented much at all. So they said, hey, could you build? And we did. We built it in. It's actually become a really cool feature. They can click a button and talk about, like we're talk about specific scenarios and record it. Our system instantly grabs that, builds content. Then they can come back if they want to later, do another record, or they can do a whole suite of recordings and upload them. But I mean so you can basically ingest any content you want. So if you have a gap where you have customers asking about part of your business that you haven't really documented well, you could quickly go in and do a 10-minute recording. Now you don't have a gap. So there's ways to solve that. But yes, you are correct in your assessment. So that's exactly how it would work.
That's good. So going back to your initial description of the kind of like the business, basically, I think what you said was something like anyone should be able to build an agent. And I think that you kind of described a lot of the mechanics in terms of how you enable that to happen. I wonder whether you could share a little bit about that whole hallucination reduction. I think that there's a lot of stuff that kind of like in the sort of enterprise context, there's a lot of things that have happened in the last sort of 12, 18 months or maybe it's a bit longer to kind of really bring down that hallucination rate, grounding it in your own content, having very specific rules, prompt chains that vet different kind of things at different stages and stuff like that. One of the things that I found really interesting, I come across this recently, was a report from AI Multiple that, because I thought that hallucination was all but solved from the point of view of enterprise agents from the techniques that I'd mentioned. But without those layers, apparently the hallucination rate of, let's say, GPT-5 on its own, the model on its own, not in ChatGPT, I think this is probably be accessed via the API, on its own, without any grounding, just a simple question and answer, 18% hallucination rate, according to this study.
It's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. GPT-5 Mini, 23%. Gemini 2.5 Pro, 20%. O3 Mini, 22%. GPT 4.1, 17%. Grok 4, 15%. That's the best one, Grok 4, 15%. So the models on their own, it surprised me that, because I thought the models were getting better, but I don't think the models are getting better. I think it's just the layers that sit behind the model are getting better.
Yeah, so two things. Number one, I think models are drifting more than they were before because they're being built as fast as they can build them. So I think model drift is real. So I think that's part of this problem. But the way you're spot on. So perfect. Let me give you a little backstory. So we were in Canada. I was up there meeting with product and took a really smart young employee with us. And he ran all of our automation and stuff. And so we were sitting in a meeting and we were talking about a oil and gas customer in the Netherlands. And we were talking about how, they were about 85%. And we were just so frustrated because their content was changing every day. It's fluctuating, it's up and down. And we're using the best models. We were using our own intents. We were trying to build intents as fast as possible, but we were just struggling. And he said, listen, let me build an agent. This is how Encore really came about. This is over a year ago. This is about 14, 15 months ago. He went out on his laptop in 30 minutes, built an agent. And the agent started doing kind of what I was talking about. It would, look at the questions coming in, whether there was intents, gaps. It looked at our key meaning, model phrases, all that in our NLP side. And it started building all this out in real time. And all of a sudden, it went to 97%. And we're like, what the heck? So what we discovered is large models are really good on embeddings. They're great. But if you provide, the magic of certain pieces of NLP, such as intents, customer-specific content or data around the lexicon, and then you allow, certain fine-tuning to be done, all of a sudden we started being, hey, we can answer 75, 80% of these perfectly every time. And then we can use large models. We basically fence them off with guardrails to this set of content, which is what's relevant. We don't need to go outside of that. And we can basically generate these intents in real time because the large models, yes, they might be 18% hallucinations, but if you've taken that down to where you're only playing ball and, 15% or 18%, now that hallucination figure gets down in like 5%, then you basically have a conversation so the end user can answer whether or not it's accurate. Now you're generating, about 3% potential hallucination. And once you build these intents and you have, an end user that can look at ones that weren't answered and see the gap, it's not real hard to get this to a 99% solution in a couple of hours of refinement and looking at testing. And so we've also built some of these automated tests that can simulate, thousands of potential user questions well before. I mean, this is all part of the onboarding. But that's how we've done it, because I agree with you. They've not got any better from an hallucination standpoint. I mean, we think OpenAI may be the best model right now, but literally, and we like Gemini a lot too. I mean, there's half our team that it thinks Gemini is best, but we literally were testing it straight, and I can't even tell you some of the hallucinations. It was unbelievable. By the way, one thing I would add is our approach we know is right for our use cases, because we literally compared answers Claude would give, which I love Claude. I mean, we're Claude users. We all believe in Claude and Inbenta. But we got better answers out of our technology. Even though Claude got the content right, we got much better answers, much more human-like, faster out of our system, because it had pre-built specific intents. It still generated, the LLM is still going to generate a much more human-like response. But by using that intent, Claude was able to do a much better job answering through our platform than just raw Claude answering.
Yeah.
So we know that's the right route, but that's how we're eliminating it. So our test on that customer or the data I was talking about, we did a pretty good data set. We wound up, I think, we ran 200 questions against it, just a visual test for a group. And we found, I think we had one hallucination. And the only hallucination we had was they asked it something specific, not part of any of the content. And they had asked us to leave it open because it's a manufacturer of laptops, and they're trying to figure out what forms customers are blasting them on for problems, because they want to, again, that's smart. They want to get ahead of it. And so we shut that off and hallucination went away. So we virtually had no hallucinations on 200 questions. And when they deployed it themselves using OpenAI, back to your point, they were at 80%. So your numbers are spot on. But anyway, but we think using again, we've got semantic search patterns. We built our own NLP. We just refined it. Our NLP that builds the intents in the customer lexicon. That is, highly scalable services technology. It's completely redone. It's new. It's very relevant. We could probably license it. We haven't chosen to do that at this time, but we do believe that large models are the best for matching using embeddings. By the way, we vectorize embeddings, intents, and we vectorize customer lexicon information, but all data is stored in a database itself. So we don't hold generative data and we don't hold NLP data. It's one data asset. So it's ultra fast. It streams, and our vector can support billions of vectors if necessary, but they're very lightweight, by the way, because we're not storing all the content there. So it's a very unique retrieval system. But it'd be good sometime for you to get a demo just to see how fast it is. I think it would be shocking to compare it to other offerings. And again, we knew that, this is something we've always done, no matter what industry I've been in, but you don't necessarily try to reinvent the wheel. You try to look at what customers are after. And first and foremost, I think they're after accuracy. I think that's really what they're after, because that could really turn customers off. So accuracy, I think ease of use, and then I think value. And I don't think value is number one. Value might have been number one, a year or so ago, because everybody was charging an enormous amount of money to onboard people. But I think it's accuracy, ease of use, and value. And you could maybe flip-flop ease of use and then accuracy, but I think accuracy is number one, because at some point, I was just on with Gardner this morning, and a lot of the things we have in Encore, the safeguards, are going to play very well in Europe, which is, a lot of our roots are in Europe. But I believe rules are going to require companies to be able to prove how they're avoiding hallucinations. and how they have the transparency to guarantee accuracy.
Yeah.
So
You're certainly going to need to have a lot more in by way of explainability and stuff like that. What's kind of interesting is that, you know, in order to get that accuracy that you mentioned is one of the most important things, or if not the most important thing, model selection becomes really important. And I saw something recently which reminded me of the kind of NLU days, which was that in the NLU days of the early stage chatbots in 2018 or so, the most commonly used platform was IBM Watson, followed by Google Dialogflow. And that's just because two big cloud providers, massive relationships in the enterprise, throw in everything at it, and also fairly early. So they kind of gobbled up the kind of initial chatbot traction. Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google are in the exact same place now as IBM Watson and Google were in 2018, which is that the vast majority of businesses that are building AI applications, vendors that are building the capabilities, leveraging these models, the vast majority are using OpenAI, Google, or Anthropic. You could probably throw some others in there, like, you know, Cohere and stuff like that, but they don't really tend to get that much kind of adoption. It seems to be the big three. I'm wondering whether you could share a little bit in terms of how you go about selecting models. Is it the big three? Is there any other models that you use? And what's your logic for selecting or fine-tuning various models?
it's a great question. I do agree with you. I think the three of them own the infrastructure right now. I think there's obviously some other players, but clearly, and a lot of these new open source models that seem very attractive. And Kimmy's, you know, obviously one of the new kids on the block. A lot of it is copied development, but you know, for our perspective, when it comes to actually using embeddings and content triage, we're going to use one of the top three. And so, Anthropic, we obviously deploy through Amazon. We have direct relationships with them for our desktops for all of our employees because it just makes us better. Claude's magical for a lot of daily tasks. Google and OpenAI are probably the two most used models on the front end. I just think they're more polished for the CX, EX space. For contextual responses, so how to make it sound right for certain use cases, there are some models like Mistral and some of these that can be used. But I would say any of them models are typically going to be deployed at Azure or on Bedrock, just from a safekeeping. We're not going to randomly go to second generation cloud providers. We do have enterprise relationships with, you know, organizations that supply direct models, like one of the big three. But we're not going to deploy other models for more unique, smaller use cases that are not deployed on Bedrock or Azure. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But when we select a model, what we're looking for is accuracy and use case. So if it's, let's say, an A use case, and we know OpenAI is the best player, it's automatically going to use OpenAI. If it's a situation where we know, hey, this is a medical use case, this, you know, it's very much dedicated. You can't, like, you don't need to add that fluent kind of layer on top of the responses. We might use Anthropic for that because they're very good at that. It could be a situation where a lot of video content, you got YouTube integration, you know, you've got a speaker that's a digital influencer for an organization. They want to pull all that content in. Google may be best for that. So I think use case, usability, cost, a customer, Google in some cases is less. If a customer comes with us with cost constraints, or they're we have a huge credit bureau that's, very much tied to one provider. If that's the case, we're going to use that provider. But if we didn't have any of that, we would look at accuracy, number one. We would look at performance, probably number two. So even though it's accurate, how fast is it providing answers? And then probably the third would be cost. Again, our customers are coming to us more about accuracy. And now when it comes to voice, it's a little bit different game because you could use a lot of different voice providers. There's, obviously LLMs play a role, but then you got all these voice providers, Ryan, Levin Labs, Deepgram, all these that you would use for models. But On the voice side, it really comes down to they want to make sure that has the right dialect. They don't want some Texan like myself, that speaks chopped proper English talking to somebody in the UK. They want a very defined British accent. I mean, so it needs to have the right cadence, the right dialect for the location. So, and then it's got to have low latency and great accuracy. So, voice plays a little different game, but it comes back to accuracy, performance, and value. And and I will tell you, for 90% of our AI operations, one of the big three are being used. Now, what shocks me is that Meta or Llama, they haven't joined the race. I mean, they have the money, but I think their focus is going to be more consumer driven, probably. And Grok, I mean, is XAI going to, I do believe there's accurate. I mean, we've tested heavily. We just haven't went that direction, but I got to think at some point it's going to play a role. I don't know, because they certainly have the money, but you are correct. It's the same thing with IBM and Google. Exactly. I remember when Watson was launched. I sat in the room at the launch of it, and but I will say this one plug. IBM's phenomenal company. Huge technical company like Oracle, others. But we met with a lot of IBM people at a show back last October, and they kept trying to get us to put Encore on IBM, and they wanted to use Watson as the model, which we still probably will entertain. We're still talking to them. The primary reason comes back to what we've been talking about. They were like, so you'll build this smart agent in the background that does all this activity, do all these automations, everything, and we could deploy this on Watson in less than 24 hours. Yeah. That's the real issue, because you can't get an IBM deployment that's fully enterprise ready that fast. And that's where it comes back to, it's time. Time's the most valuable asset we have. And, if a person can basically showcase the value of the AI deployment that fast, they can typically get budget for it.
Yeah, 100%. And if you can try it that fast, it's worth spending the money on. Because well, if we can spend a bit of money and find out in 2 weeks, then it's better than spending the same amount of money and finding out in 6 months. That's always been a problem with IBM. It's always been very slow to build in IBM's ecosystem. What do you think then, if we were to have this conversation again in 12 months' time, what do you think will be the biggest thing to have moved on by then?
Yeah, we're going to have it again, because I went to Yellow Hat. I don't want to be the only. I want to be the second guy other than Curious George's his dad or his caretaker.
Yeah.
What I would say. So I think when we talk again, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, I think hyper automation is going to come on the scene. And what I mean is, I think very few companies are going to get it, but being able to bridge that gap where agentic intelligence, interacts with robotic, processes, where hyper automation becomes super intelligent. That's going to be big. It's going to change how automation's done. Everybody's so focused on MCP, A2A, all these. There's like 13 of them now. They keep coming out with new ones. Realistically, all that is a layer on top of APIs. Let's not get too crazy. It is a good way to communicate. It's like it's like a network switch. We could do a wire between you and I, but we could also have a switch so 5 other people can plug in. And that's really what MCP is, but it is a layer. There's probably another smarter way to do it. And we'll see that develop. I think agents are basically within a year. I think, Encore's, you're going to, and I want you to see Encore. We need it. We'll send you a video or something. You can see it. It's so easy to set up, but I think in a year, it's going to be that much easier. I think you're going to log in. You're going to say the name of the business. It's going to connect to a website. You're going to get asked, do you want to add any files? And you just walk away and it does everything. It's almost going to be like you have your cell phone. You can just speak to it. So, what I would love to see in under 15 seconds, you build an enterprise grade assistant with an agent supporting it virtually by speaking. It's going to get that wild. And again, my hope would be these models become intelligent enough we lose some hallucinations. because again, it'd be great if they do that. But the other thing is, I would hope in a year that infrastructure, one, we get a lot more of it built, and that drives the cost down because there's a lot of small businesses. You see this more in Europe because everybody, there's businesses everywhere that are not chains. But when we set out to build Encore, we also were thinking about, there's tons of businesses in Europe and Asia and Latin America that need access to AI. They can't afford, to spend a ton of money, and they need a way to do it. And so I would hope that AI becomes more affordable. AI is the great level setter when it comes to technology because it gives everybody an opportunity, but I would like it to also give some of these smaller businesses opportunities. The last thing I think in a year is Inbenta will engage in payments. So we'll be driving payment processes, whether that's identity proofing, all these things I think are going to be driven through smart agents to where if you've got a use case that needs Stripe or somebody or one of these systems fully integrated with a couple of clicks, we're going to play in that space. So that's part of the strategy is to be able to connect to a variety of other platform providers and have this one click of excellence. In fact, next week in Vegas, I'll be there speaking at a partner conference, and that's exactly why we're there. We're identifying 4 or 5 key new partners. How can we make their lives extraordinarily easy? How can we adapt to their environment and help their customers? But I think that's where it's going to become much more collaborative. If it doesn't, then consolidation is going to happen much more rapidly than it's already happening. That's the last thing I would leave with is there is going to be AI consolidation. These big companies, we mentioned IBM, we mentioned Google, these large companies outside of the big three, Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI, they're going to have to start consolidating. You look at Salesforce. Salesforce needs to consolidate to really smart AI businesses. Your Genesis, your Five9s, these companies have got to consolidate and bring really intelligent AI. And even Zoom, the platform we're on, they bought one. They should be consolidating because your AI is going to have to be your strategy. It's not one of your strategies. It is your strategy. And I mean, there's technology. I would argue that CRMs, if you're interacting with your customer and you have the right reporting and a smart agent to tell you everything you want to know about your customer interactions, I don't know if you need a CRM because that agent could put a report in your inbox every morning that would be 10x better than looking at CRM dashboards. So that's not that I don't like Salesforce. It's a great tool. A lot of these are good tools, but we're getting to a spot where with Claude and some of these, there's a lot you can do, man. There's a lot of companies out there that refine our activities. And I think in a year, it's just going to be, I think it'll blow our minds. I think we're still I don't think we're in the first inning. I used to say, yeah, we probably are in the second. No, I don't think we're there. I think we're just getting started. Consumer AI is going to rapidly evolve. I think even faster than enterprise, but enterprise still has a lot of refinement.
Yeah.
I live it every day, and it blows my mind.
Yeah.
It shocks me how fast it's moving.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I hope for, and the reason why I kind of agree with you that we're literally at the beginning of this is because certainly on the enterprise side, most of the conversation around AI is essentially to replace the thing that you already do today. It's to take the weight from your contact center, or it's to take the weight from your sales team, or it's to streamline IT processes, or it's all stuff that you already do. And having AI handle that, you're not necessarily gaining anything new. You're just taking away some of the grunt work of what you already did. What I'm excited to see is how businesses explore the new value that they can create using AI. Because, as you've mentioned Claude a few times. Claude is phenomenal. Claude Code is phenomenal. And those types of platforms where you can just express an idea, have something manifest itself. If you can put that into a business and let people's imaginations run, well, that's the most limiting factor for me in AI today is a complete lack of imagination. All we're doing 100%. Is replacing what we're already doing. Replace the calls in our contact center, replace the calls to IT, replace the HR requests. It's all the same stuff. Whereas if we can solve that problem first, I'm not saying it's not worth solving, solve that problem first, and then hopefully you can then have the time and the capacity and the space to say, well, how can we imagine a better business? How can we affect people better? How can we improve people's lives? How do we make everything better, you know?
Let me ask you a question real quick, then I'll answer that. I'll comment on that. What country do you think is producing the most creative AI kind of, just the vision? So what country do you think is creating the most creative AI, like, creativity, intelligence, building products, that kind of stuff?
So I have a limited view on every country, but I think that some of the things that I see coming out of China seems to be a little bit more or less hinged. It's a bit more unhinged. They don't really care. Yeah. They've got companions, they've got robots, they've got house robots, they've got all kinds of stuff that seems to be a little bit less restricted and a little bit more on the creative side.
I'm going to tell you, sorry to cut you off there, but I'm going to tell you why I think you're spot on. You and I would completely agree there. My challenge, and again, I got to be real careful here because I got a brilliant daughter that teaches math and science. So I don't want to get in trouble for her if she happens to watch this. But what I would say is, I think our educational system, we are teaching, not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not an educational expert. Let me put that disclaimer out there. But I think the educational system is teaching the same stuff over and over with very little refinement. Where in China, and a lot of the countries similar to China, they are teaching specific like trade intelligence, which means that, if a person's really bright, they seem creative, they're pushed to that path probably at 5 years old. They're not, having to spend the next 8 years learning to read better. Now, reading's great, so maybe they do if they're really smart. I don't know. But the point is, I think that's why there's more creativity. Here's what I would say. You are spot on. Right now, it's all about replacing the repetitive task, and it's not making anything better. Here's what I would say to employees that are scared of it or employers that don't know how to act. You should use this moment. If you're going to deploy AI in the guaranteed wins, that's what I call them. It's like we can deploy shadow AI, which we do all the time, and I can show you guaranteed wins. Well, then guaranteed wins are not changing much. It might do it better if you have a disgruntled employee, but I'm just simply doing the same thing for less money. But if I was an owner or an employee, I would get creative. I was at the hardware store returning towel at a townhome rental that I remodeled. I took the towel back. Young man, 26 years old, was helping me load the towel up because I messed my back up during a storm, and he loaded for me. And he said, "What do you do for a living?" He's looking at my truck. I have a truck that's pretty fast, 700 horsepower, whatever it is. And I was talking to him, and he goes, "Well, what should I be doing?" I said, "Do you have any ideas and dreams? Is there anything you're passionate about?" "Yeah, I'd like that." I said, then I gave him like 4 websites. They're free tools. Learn AI. Start thinking about how, if you were in charge, if you were developing or building something, how would it look? I said, because you better start dreaming unless you always want to be loading towel. Not that this is a bad job. I couldn't have got let me be clear. I told him, I could not have succeeded today if you wouldn't have had, one, the aptitude, you were kind and you helped me load this. Didn't have to. You could have been, a prick about it and, made me wait, but you came immediately and helped. So that tells me you have a servant mindset, which means you have a chance to be real successful in the world, because servitude's a very important trait. But I told him, I said, you need to go to these sites, you need to start doing research, learn AI. And so what employers have got to realize is, if they're simply going to use AI to replace the repetitive stuff, they quickly should be able to use AI to figure out who's creative and not. Because to your point, this is why we gave Claude to every employee at Inbenta. I will never, that 22-year-old that went to Canada, which changed our entire trajectory of Inbenta, because we built a brand new platform that's far going to succeed anything we've ever built before. I think it's going to put us in a driver's seat for a little while that we get copied. If I would have been arrogant and wouldn't have let him set in on the conversation and listen to him, we'd be in trouble. But I'm old enough to know better. You let smart people talk and you try to listen. And, he did a fabulous job architecting with others' help, but he drove it. And so what I would say is, employers have got to get that, if they want to just simply do the small tasks, do it. But then they got to take the next gamble. And that is get tools like Claude and other tools in people's hands and figure out who's creative. AI is not going to replace the mind if the mind is exercised and used right. It can make the mind much more powerful, but humans are uniquely built. Machines will never replicate the exact design of a human. If that was the case, then none of us would have illnesses. People would live to be 500, all these things. We're uniquely built. And so the point is, though, some people choose, whether it's educational patterns, for whatever reason, they choose to use the intelligence that they were born with. And so that's why China and some of these countries, I think, are outweighing other countries, is how they educate. They're not saying socially the countries are right, but I think that's why they're ahead. And I believe there are smart people in Europe and the US. Yes, I work with them every day. And we have found, now that we've deployed Claude and some of these other AI tools, Cursor and these other things, we're starting to see who our best are. And listen, the premium or the best, it's like the cream rises. It's the same thing. If you're exceptional, if people will actually pay attention, if you're exceptional, it's not hard to spot. And we've been able to really identify who the real, superstars are in our business. And I love it, because a lot of these people would have never been given a chance, whether it's someone in Latin America that was stuck in a bad job, or someone in Toronto that never been given an opportunity, or a couple of guys in Spain that, no one even knew their name. They're key ingredients to what we're baking right now. And it's because we gave people the tools. And when I gave the tools, I spent the money on these tools. I gave a little speech, like a 2-minute deal. I simply said, listen, guys, you're going to have to use these tools on your own time. This is about your future. If you take and start understanding this is your future, you're going to make my future much better. But this has got to be about your future, whether it's at Inbenta or somewhere else. You've got to learn, because we're at the beginning stages. The horses are kicking their feet. They haven't left the chute yet. But this is your gold rush moment. There's going to be more millionaires and billionaires made than the gold rush. And you need to understand that. I'm in my 50s. This is way bigger than the internet. And it's going to be up to people whether or not they want to chase it. It's that simple. The AI is the great leveler. You could have a high school dropout that's going to be worth $10 billion, versus the Harvard grad that has still got his student loan. That's the magic of AI. So.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Merlin, this has been a fantastic conversation. Let's see, in 12 months' time, will these predictions come to pass? Let's see.
Yeah, maybe we do the next podcast in London. We'll have to see if we can't work that out. I'll put my yellow hat on.
Put your yellow hat on. I'll bring it with me.
I'm getting a yellow hat.
Nice one. Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure as always. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you again on the next one. Cheers now.